The Senate will come to order. Mr. Carpenter, please call the roll.
Senate District 31, vacant. Bridges. Cook.
Excuse.
Corum. Crowder. Danielson. Donovan. Finberg, Fields, Foot, Gardner,
Excused.
Janal, Gonzalez, Hill,
Excused.
Heisey, Holbert, Lee, Lundeen, Marble, Marble, Moreno, Pedersen, Priola, Priola,
Absent.
Rankin, Rodriguez, Scott,
Excused.
Smallwood, Sonnenberg, Story, Tate, Todd, Williams, Winter, Woodward, Zinzinger, Mr. President,
Here. With 29 present, 1 absent, and 4 excused, and 1 vacancy, we have a quorum. Senator Bridges, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adoption of the journal. Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the journal be read at length. Oh, no, that's last year's motion. Sorry, Mr. President. I move the reading of the journal for Thursday, January 16th be dispensed with and approved as corrected by our secretary.
You have heard the motion. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the motion is adopted. Mr. Carpenter, would you please add Senator Priola to the roll call? Election of President Pro Tem. Due to the resignation of Senator Lois Court, the next order of business for the body is the election of a President Pro Tem. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's with great honor that I nominate Senator Todd for President Pro Tem of the Senate for the second regular session of the 72nd General Assembly.
Mr. Minority Leader. Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is an honor for me to second the nomination of Senator Nancy Todd to the position of Senate President Pro Tem.
Mr. Majority Leader, are there any other nominations? Seeing none, Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that nominations be closed and that a unanimous vote be cast for Senator Todd for President Pro Tem.
Are there any no votes? Seeing none, a unanimous vote has been cast. Senator Todd is hereby elected as President Pro Tem for the Colorado State Senate for the second regular session of the 72nd General Assembly. Congratulations, Senator Todd. Introduction of bills.
Senate Bill 113 by Senator Tate and Representative Valdez D. concerning the mandatory contents of each license issued to a health facility by the Department of Public Health and Environment.
Health and Human Services. Message from the House. Members, just so you are aware, there are a couple of things. We are waiting on the House to finish their memorial on former Representative Wayne Knott and to also pass the Martin Luther King Jr. resolution, which will be introduced and considered once we receive it. So we'll be holding in a pattern until we receive that. Additionally, if you have not already heard, Representative Chris Hansen was appointed to Senate District 31 Vacancy Committee to fill the vacancy vacated by Senator Court's resignation, which was effective yesterday. We anticipate having all the necessary documents ready, and we'll have the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court here on Tuesday morning. Remember that Tuesday... Members, staff, remember that the Chief Justice will be here of the Supreme Court Tuesday morning at 0900 to swear in Chris Hansen. Senate will stand in brief recess. Senate will come back to order. Mr. Carpenter, please excuse Senator Quorum from the roll. Message from the House.
The House has adopted and transmits herewith House Joint Resolution 1002 is printed in the House Journal, January 17, 2020.
Introduction and consideration of resolutions. Will the clerk please read the title to HJR 1002?
House Joint Resolution 1002 by Representatives Melton and Herod and Senators Williams and Fields concerning the commemoration of the birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. We move HJR 20-1002 and ask that it be read at length.
Mr. Carpenter, please read the resolution at length.
House Joint Resolution 1002 by Representatives Melton and Herod and Senators Williams and Fields concerning the commemoration of the birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Whereas the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. was born in Atlanta, Georgia on January 15, 1929, graduated from Morehouse College with a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1948, graduated from Crozer Theological Seminary in 1951, and received a Ph.D. from Boston University in 1955. And whereas Reverend Dr. King's faith, resiliency, and commitment to justice became known worldwide through his speeches, writings, and actions. And whereas Reverend Dr. King declared that the moral responsibility to aid the oppressed did not stop at the edge of his street, town, or state when he wrote, "I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And whereas Reverend Dr. King withstood attacks on his home and family, among numerous other threats and setbacks, standing firm in his conviction that although the arc of the moral universe is long, it bends towards justice. And whereas Reverend Dr. King led the Montgomery bus boycott, a 13-month protest beginning in 1955 against the segregated city bus lines. And whereas the Montgomery bus boycott led to the integration of the Montgomery city bus system and is widely credited as the beginning of the civil rights movement in America. And whereas in 1957, Reverend Dr. King was elected president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization formed to provide leadership for the burgeoning civil rights movement. And whereas between 1957 and 1968, Reverend Dr. King spoke more than 2,500 times, wrote 5 books as well as numerous articles, led protests, helped register African American voters, was arrested more than 20 times, was awarded 5 honorary degrees, was named Man of the Year by Time magazine, and became the symbolic leader of the African American community as well as a world figure. And whereas, on August 28, 1963, Reverend Dr. King directed the March on Washington, wherein more than 200,000 Americans gathered in the name of equality and civil rights, and which culminated in Reverend Dr. King's historic "I Have a Dream" speech. And whereas the leadership of Reverend Dr. King was instrumental in bringing about landmark legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibited segregation in public accommodations and facilities and banned discrimination based on race, color, or national origin, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which eliminated remaining legal barriers to voting for disenfranchised African American voters. And whereas, in 1964, Reverend Dr. King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his tireless and selfless work in the pursuit of justice for African Americans and other oppressed people in America. And whereas Reverend Dr. King's 13 years of nonviolent leadership ended abruptly and tragically when on April 4th, 1968, he was assassinated while standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. And whereas Reverend Dr. King's life and work continue to echo in our lives as we strive to reach the lofty goal he set when he said, "Let us all hope that the dark clouds of racial prejudice will soon pass away, and the deep fog of misunderstanding will be lifted from our fear-drenched communities, and in some not too distant tomorrow, the radiant stars of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty. And whereas Reverend Dr. King's birthday is a federal holiday in the United States and a state holiday in the state of Colorado, which is celebrated each year on the third Monday in January. And whereas on Monday, January 20, 2020, we celebrated the 34th anniversary of Reverend Dr. King's holiday. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 72nd General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, hereby encourage appropriate observances, ceremonies, and activities to commemorate the federal and state legal holiday honoring the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. throughout all cities, towns, counties, school districts, and local governments within Colorado.
Is there any discussion? Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members, please feel free to be seated. Members, today we're here in the recognition of what would have been Martin Luther King's 91st birthday, one of our greatest leaders. We commemorate Martin Luther King Jr.'s holiday, not just as a day off, but a day to be reminded of the sacrifices that he made on all of our behalves. As a Black woman, Dr. King's words, life and legacy, spoke to me well before I reached adulthood. My parents used to take us on vacations every summer. We traveled to Memphis, Tennessee, when I was barely a teenager, to visit the Lorraine Hotel, where Dr. King ultimately had his life taken. It sticks to me for obvious reasons. So when I was 16, and I was in a speech class and I was asked to do a speech, I flipped through my mother's Reader's Digest, searching and searching for copies of speeches that I could deliver. As I flipped through them, I came through and landed on the Drum Major Instinct, a sermon that Dr. King delivered 2 months before he was murdered at the motel that I visited just a few years earlier as a young girl. In the sermon, Dr. King shares with us the biblical story of James and John, who requested that Jesus give them the most coveted seats next to him in heaven. Jesus didn't chastise them for their selfish request, and neither did Dr. King, because John and James' desire is one he sees within all of us. That is the drum major instinct. Desire that we all have to bang our drums and receive recognition. So rather than to squash our universal drum major instinct, Dr. King suggested we harness it and use it to stand in the service of others. We can define greatness as our titles and positions that contribute to an attitude of exclusivity or classism, or we can redefine greatness as our ability to show up for others, which is what we are called here to do. From the pulpit of Ebenezer Baptist Church, his original recitation of the drum major instinct concludes with a tragically prophetic declaration about what he wants for his funeral. And Dr. King said, if any of you are around when I have to meet my day, I don't want a long funeral. And if you get somebody to deliver the eulogy, tell them not to talk too long. And every now and then, he would wonder what he would want them to say. Tell them not to mention that I was a Nobel Peace Prize winner. That's not important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 awards. That's not important either. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. He said, I'd like somebody to mention that the day Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others. I'd like for somebody to say that the day Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I want you to say that I tried to be righteous on the war question. I want you to be able to say, there was a day that I tried to feed the hungry. And I want you to say that the day I tried in my life to clothe those who were naked. I want you to say on that day that I did try to visit those who were in prison. I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness. And all the other shallow things will not matter. I won't have any money to leave behind. I won't have fine, luxurious things of life to leave behind. But I just want to leave a committed life behind. And that's all I want to say. So it is not our title as senator that has ordained us with the power to stand up for our communities and our neighbors. It is the enduring choice of every single person that we can make to channel our drum major instinct to beat for public service. My drum major still beats on behalf of the girl who took the trip, stood on the balcony of where Dr. King was assassinated. But as we take time to recognize Dr. King in this chamber, I challenge all of you to check yourself and see what your drum major instinct is beating for. Thank you.
Senator Phillips.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank my colleague for those powerful words and a reminder about the life and legacy of Dr. King. He was truly a drum major for justice. Members, I just want to take a little time to kind of recap how we got to the point in Colorado that we celebrate the Martin Luther King holiday. It took Wellington Webb and Wilma Webb 14 years to pass this state holiday, 14 times. And throughout that 14-year time, the response that she would get, or Wellington would get, the honorables, was no. There wasn't much justification as to why they said no, but they said no. And it was during the time when she was a House of Representatives that this measure was rejected. But it was in 1984 that President Reagan signed the federal holiday. That was like a green light signal that it was time for us to pass this legislation here in the state of Colorado. And so it was successfully passed in 1981. It was Honorable Wilma Webb who coined the phrase marade. Marade is a joining of two words, march and parade. So we have a parade in the state of Colorado every year, and it's based on her ability to be persistent and diligent to make sure that we're doing something in the state of Colorado to celebrate his life. And like my colleague said from Denver, that celebration is a day on, not a day off. But once we were able to adopt the state holiday, there was much resistance to the state celebrating the life of Martin Luther King. It was in 1992 that the KKK, the Klansmen, decided that they was going to go ahead and get a permit to have the Capitol grounds at the same time that we wanted to have the parade for Martin Luther King. So the marchers for the parade had to be escorted by Denver police and state patrol and others at the same time that the Klansmen had the right to occupy the same space and time. It was a sad time to see that kind of conflict exist right here in our community. But what happened the following year is that through the efforts of Honorable Wilma Webb, she was able to get some volunteers, and they would camp outside the Capitol grounds so they could be first in line to get the permit. because they didn't want to have to be confronted with that situation again, that they would have to compete with the Klansmen as it relates to celebrating this celebration at the same time as the Klansmen wanted to do their thing. So they stayed out there for 4 days, just like some people do when they're trying to get the first tickets to a concert. But the Klansmen didn't show up. And what happened is it was Governor Lamb, he was the governor at that time, and they changed the policy. And the policy says now that if there's an annual event like the Marade, then they don't have to stand in line anymore. They don't have to camp out anymore for them to have the permit to use the ground. So that's why you don't see their competition as it relates to the day and the time as it relates to using the Capitol grounds. You heard in the resolution that on April the 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated. He was assassinated on the second floor balcony at the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was shot with a bullet, and the bullet went through his jaw bone there, and then it paralyzed him. He was rushed to the hospital, and he only lived for about an hour. But what I want to remind you all is the bullet may have killed Dr. King, but a bullet never killed his ideas. That bullet never killed his dream. His dream lives on and on and on, and it lives in each of us. I'm quite sure we each have a favorite quote that we use in our own daily living that we remember. There's many I can recall and many I could cite. But the one that is dear to my heart is, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So just because he was assassinated by a bullet, let's know that his ideas cannot be shot down. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion. Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we say every year, thank you to the sponsors for bringing this. It is important that we remember it's also risky to talk about one's own experience, because this is not about me or you or any of us, but Dr. King. As I spoke last year, I think it's important, though, that those of us who lived through these events remember and share. My first memory wasn't of Dr. King's assassination, but it occurred one morning in November 1963. And my first memory that I can tie back to a specific moment was when the ladies in the grocery store began to scream because they just learned of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And my first memory is being pulled out of the grocery cart and rushed out to the car as my mom raced home to call my dad and find out what had happened. And then in 1968, I would have been 7, wondering why someone would have killed Dr. King just for disagreeing with him, for not agreeing with his positions. Why would they do that? The 60s were a violent time. We saw John F. Kennedy and his brother Bobby and Dr. King all assassinated, and it was different then because those things came into our living rooms via this thing that pretty much everyone had then, television. Now we take that for granted because we carry one of those around with us in our pocket and look at it constantly. With all due respect to the good former senator, now Lois Court, sometimes we have those in our hands while we're driving. Dr. King's life affected me as a young person, as a 7-year-old. But it was amazing to see as I moved on to junior high school and high school, and at that time living in South Carolina, that there were people who truly embraced racist perspectives. And that was shocking for me to come to understand. But it was inspirational to see teachers and leaders in the community really embrace what what Dr. King had encouraged us to do, to judge each other by the content of our character, not the covering that we really had no control over. And I'm just grateful each year when we consider this resolution that the influence that he had on my life and really society, there are people of my generation who do not understand and do not embrace the idea that one race is better than another, that we are all equal in God's eyes. And it's really our responsibility to prove ourselves through the content of our character. And it is our charge to judge each other by that. Thank you to the sponsors. Thank you, Mr. President. And God bless the memory of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I do appreciate this, the ladies bringing this forward today. I'd like to basically expand on Senator Hobart's comments, how it does affect us personally. If you recall, there was in the introduction, there was talking about 200,000 people at the Lincoln Memorial. If you go to that Lincoln Memorial and go down a number of steps, you will see embedded in the step, here is where Dr. King stood when he made that speech. And if you stand there and look out at the pond and whatnot, and imagine 200,000 people there and the times we're in, it was just simply amazing. You know, when he was assassinated, I was actually in the military. And, the reality is the black brothers that I had at that time, we did watch each other's back. You know, and there was not a question of basically race, it was a question of survival for the United States. So I want to thank them as well as all of my other colleagues in the military for their attitude toward the United States. And a lot of us were drafted at the time, but it was, once we got into a situation in Southeast Asia, it was one of codification. It was one of, you watch my back, I'll watch yours. And I think the military has done a remarkable job on integration in this state. I was always perplexed at the Southern Democrats, how they would try and block integration at schools. And, it was an amazing time that we lived through. But I think that it was an important time that we lived through. It got us to where we are today. Equality, that's what it's about, equality. And another thing I'd like to point out, I would like to also commend the Capitol, whoever takes care of the paintings in the Capitol on the first floor. If you notice, Dr. King's photograph is alone. And at one point there was quite a few there. But I think that reflection carries on how we look at things. If we just take a minute to gaze up at that photograph and realize the importance that this individual had in our country moving forward. And I think that it was the right guy at the right place at the right time. I think it has woken up the country on a lot of things. But I'm grateful for this resolution coming forward today, and I will be at the parade Monday. And I would invite you all to join us, and I would invite this group to join the Republicans in the parade. But I think that it's an important issue that we should declare every year. I know there's a lot of sacrifice, there's a lot of talk, and it will continue, but it's getting better, in my opinion. But again, I would like to thank the sponsors for bringing this forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thanks to my colleagues for bringing this resolution. It is truly one of the most important resolutions we bring during the course of our legislative session. Dr. King, in my view, is the singularly most inspirational orator of his generation. In this chamber, where words are the currency of the day, Martin Luther King stands tall as the preeminent wordsmith of our day. His soaring rhetoric captured the imagination of millions who are marginalized and excluded from the American dream, despite the principles set forth in the Declaration of Independence that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And despite the privileges and immunities and the rights set forth in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, and despite the rights and privileges set forth in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, people of color in the United States were systematically denied the fundamental rights and opportunities of our society. Martin Luther King, with his words, articulated the pain of millions of people and the agony of the dispossessed. He became the conscience of the nation. He inspired millions of idealists, young and old. His iconic words resonate with us today. For any of you who have been in my office, and most of you have, there's a tapestry of the I Have the Dream speech on my wall. I look at that periodically. The words of Martin Luther King resonate with us. I would like to recite a few of them because they are like the hymns and the songs of our age. Some of my favorites. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. The time is always right to do what is right. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step towards the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless exertions and passionate concerns of dedicated individuals. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, the words recited by our minority leader. In his letter from the Birmingham jail, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied to a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. That is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil triumphant. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And finally, there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must take it because its conscience tells him it is right. I rise in strong support of this resolution, urge an aye vote, and thank my colleagues for bringing it.
Having no further discussion, the motion is the adoption of HJR 1002. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 29 ayes, 0 no votes, 0 absent, and 5 excused and 1 vacancy, HJR 1002 is adopted. Co-sponsors, Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to ask and move that today's roll call be added as co-sponsors on HJR 1002.
Seeing no objection, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Message from the governor.
Thank you.
November 14th, 2019, the Colorado Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, pursuant to powers conferred by Constitutional laws of the state of Colorado, I have the honor to designate appointments into consideration of the following. Pinnacle Assurance Board of Directors effective January 1st, 2020 for a term expiring January 1st, 2025. Mark David Goodman of Denver, Colorado, an employee whose liability is insured by Pinnacle Assurance, reappointed. Sincerely, Jared Polis, Governor.
Business, labor, and technology.
August 22nd, 2019, the Colorado Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, pursuant to powers conferred by Constitutional laws of the state of Colorado, I have the honor to designate appointment reappointments made into consideration of the following members of the uninsured employer board for effective September 1st, 2019 for a term expiring September 1st, 2022. Roger Allen Hayes of Aurora, Colorado, serves as representative of employers reappointed. Sincerely, Jared Polis, Governor.
Business, labor, and technology.
July 29, 2019, the Colorado Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, pursuant to powers conferred by Constitutional laws of the state of Colorado, I have the honor to designate appointments made into consideration of the following members of the state electrical board for term expiring July 1st, 2022. Christopher Huntington Butler of Highlands Ranch, Colorado, a member of the public at large, appointed Chad Kelly Dell of Ray, Colorado, to serve as an electrical contractor who has a master's license, appointed. Sincerely, Jared Polis, Governor.
Business, labor, and technology.
July 11, 2019, the Colorado Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, pursuant to powers conferred by Constitutional laws of the state of Colorado, I have the honor to designate appoint reappointments made to consideration of the following members of the State Plumbing Board for a term expiring July 1st, 2023. Kevin Thomas Horry of Littleton, Colorado, to serve as a representative of General Contractors as an unaffiliated appointed. Noreen H. McMahon of Steamboat Springs, Colorado, to serve as an at-large member reappointed. Sincerely, Jared Polis, Governor.
Business, labor, and technology.
June 27, 2019, the Colorado Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, pursuant to powers conferred by the Constitution and the laws of the state of Colorado, I have the honor to designate appoint reappointments made to consideration of the following members of the Special Funds Board for Works Compensation Self-Insurance for term expiring July 1st, 2023. Jeffrey L. Green, ARMP of Loveland, Colorado, to serve as a manager or employee of self-insured employers in good standing with knowledge of risk management and finance. Reappointed Christine Hoppy of Arvada, Colorado, to serve as a manager of employers, self-insured employers in good standing. Appointed. Sincerely, Jared Polis, Governor.
Business, labor, and technology.
May 4th, 2019, the Colorado Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, pursuant to the powers conferred by Constitutional laws of the state of Colorado, I have the honor to designate appoint reappointments made to consideration of the following members of the Colorado Wildlife Habitat Stamp Committee for terms expiring December 31st, 2022. Timothy Brass of Longmont, Colorado, an at-large member reappointed. Thomas Dwayne Brossi of Durango, Colorado, a sportsperson reappointed. Daniel C. Gates of Kansas City, Colorado, a sportsperson reappointed. Robert William Wynn of Rifle, Colorado, a sportsperson appointed. Ashley Johnson Rust of Denver, Colorado, representative national or regionally recognized conservation organization whose mission is focused on non-game wildlife and whose membership is composed primarily of non-game wildlife users. Appointed. Sincerely, Jared Polis, Governor.
Agriculture and natural resources. Announcements. Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to invite all of you all to join the community and the state for the parade, which is going to be on Monday. We convene at 9:15 at the Martin Luther King statue for a brief program, and then we march down Colfax all the way to the state capitol steps. So we start that journey at 10 a.m. after the program. Would love to see each of you there. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Priola.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, if I could draw your attention to this flyer that's sitting on your desk. Today, I'd like to highlight that one-pager from Children's Hospital in Colorado. I'm proud that Children's Hospital Colorado is in my district and to work with them each year for kids' policies and advocating issues. Kids are incredibly different and they need incredibly different care. So take a look over it and enjoy the weekend.
Having no further announcements, Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, just a reminder, we will not be meeting on Monday in observation of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, but we will be convening at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, so not 10 a.m., but at 9 a.m. on Tuesday to get the week started. Hope to see many of you at the parade, and if not, I hope you all are doing something in honor of Dr. King and his legacy for that day. Mr. President, for now, I move that the Senate adjourn until 9 a.m. Tuesday, January 21st, 2020.
You have heard the motion. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the The Senate will stand in adjournment until 0900 hours on Tuesday, January 21st, 2020.